So the scripture for today is that story I shared with the kids from Exodus 17, verses 1 through 7. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages as God commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses, and they said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? And why do you test God?" But the people thirsted for water. And the people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to Yahweh, "What shall I do for this people? They're almost ready to stone me." And God said to Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. And I will be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it, and then the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Massah, which means test, and Meribah, which means quarrel, because the Israelites quarreled and tested God, saying, "Is God among us or not?" That's the end of the reading. Well, I did check around for water jokes. There was one that was groan-worthy. What do you get when you mix holy water with laxatives? A religious movement. As I shared with the kids earlier today, a huge part of the history of the Jewish people, the people of Jesus, and I don't know how many times I'm going to have to ask that question, who are Jesus' people? But we will get it. And I trust you adults now know the answer. But one of their big historical stories, was their experience of having been slaves in Egypt, the empire of Egypt, for 400 years, and then they were set free. And that experience of having been in an extremely painful place, to put it mildly, destitute, traumatized, slavery, and then being set free by God and led into freedom and into a new place. That is one of the big stories in the heart of the biblical narrative. It's what scholar Marcus Borg and other scholars refer to as one of the meta-narratives, the big overarching themes of the Bible. Almost every Jewish festival and religious holiday begins with a liturgy in which the people say something like, "We were once slaves in Egypt, but God set us free." And that's our spiritual history as followers of Jesus. And I hope your own personal journey includes some deep and rich experiences of being led by God out of times or situations when you felt stuck, between a rock and a hard place, up against it, and God somehow met you there. You somehow found your way to God, God to you, and God met you there and helped you get through it and brought you out on the other side into someplace new and more beautiful. That's one of the main patterns that gets repeated in the Bible and hopefully is real in each of our lives. Because all of us go through some stuff, right? But these journeys out of a painful place and into a new and better place are often not linear. And they're often not without conflict. And times when it all gets scary and extremely uncertain. Transition times. It's amazing how quarrels and times that feel like tests come up in transition times. When you've left something and you're headed somewhere new, and maybe you're not even sure completely you had to go, you're headed somewhere new, but you're not there yet. That time in between, it's fertile soil for God to do stuff. As Millard Fuller, the founder of Habitat for Humanity, once said, he's founded Habitat for Humanity after a very difficult time in his life. And he said, it's amazing what God can do when you're flat on your back. He was more open. He was listening. And all of his normal defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms and ways that you can kind of keep turmoil that might really change things at a safe distance, in those transition times, the soil gets turned over often. So as we heard during the children's message, God had just led the people out of their slavery, crossed the Red Sea, and finally into freedom from the Egyptians, only to take them into what the Bible refers to as a wilderness, a desert, a barren, unknown, uncharted, unfamiliar place. And they wandered there for 40 years before they got to the promised land. And 40 in the Bible, by the way, is kind of code language for a long time, but just the right amount of time for the lessons that you need to learn to get learned. When things are taking a long time, sometimes it helps to say, there's probably something important that hasn't been made obvious yet that I need to pay attention to, listen for. Now, I've touched on what's often referred to as the back to Egypt motif, and I'm just going to touch on it just barely today. But it's when you finally leave or end the thing that you know you need or want to leave, maybe even something you need to, and even though part of you doesn't want to, but you need to end it or leave it. And hopefully you're feeling led by God to leave something painful behind, so you do, finally. But as I said, you're not fully into the new thing or the next stage of your process yet. And maybe as you're heading toward that new thing, it's all of a sudden not seeming as unambiguously wonderful as you thought it might. And in that place, people often start to question everything. Maybe I shouldn't have left. Or maybe you got left. Maybe you're in a transition that you did not necessarily want, but here it is. Was it my fault? Was I not listening well? What now? That old thing was at least familiar, right? I wasn't really all that happy, but I at least knew how to do that. To be honest, I miss aspects of it. I knew a person who was coming out of addiction one time, and in a meeting said, to be honest, I missed the drama. There was something kind of alluring about the chaos of the mess of my life. I kind of miss it. It's too quiet now. So it's that time where you're doubting. And as the people of Israel finally just said, hey, is God with us or not? And that can be the scariest doubt of all, when you feel like you're making a move because you're led by God to do it, and then things aren't going that well, and you find yourself, did I make this God stuff up? Is there even a God? Did I take myself on some psychological trip and now, man, I'm in the creek without a paddle? Well, if you're in such a place today and you want to talk about it, get in touch with me and I will do whatever I can to help you connect with God. Obviously, I'm betting my whole life that there is a God who is wonderfully real and very much with you right now, wherever you are. But today is not just Communion Sunday, but it's World Communion Sunday. And churches of many, many different denominations will use communion this first Sunday of October to proclaim our unity and connection to everyone, everywhere. And so I want to give the rest of my message to the simple fact that what threw the people of Israel into turmoil was that they didn't have any water to drink. They were thirsty, literally, and probably metaphorically. And it hit them, apart from some sort of miracle, we're going to die of thirst out here in this God-forsaken desert. And so they let Moses have it. At least in Egypt we had water. Moses, who the heck are you? Bring us out here. And you know the rest of the story. Moses cried out to God. And God told him, take your staff, hit this rock. And water came out. And the people drank and they stayed alive. And by the way, in 1 Corinthians 10:4, the Apostle Paul, referring to this story, says, and that rock was the Christ. And that's just a little teaser for those of you who are interested in the concept of the universal Christ, the idea that the Christ is bigger and beyond just the person of Jesus. If that confuses you, just let it go. If it intrigues you, talk to me about it later. But back to the water. As I've said many times, the deepest truths are often so simple and accessible, and they have a very literal interpretation, and then they also have deeply metaphorical and spiritual interpretations as well. The concept of being thirsty is one of those. Literal thirst, when you need to drink. And as we all know, human beings can't go for long without water and remain alive. You might say it's our most basic human need, apart from air to breathe. One of the blessings and the privileges that most of us in our culture take for granted, and we can't help it, we all grew up here, most of us, is access to clean, drinkable water. It's amazing that, really, it is amazing that we can turn on a faucet and stick our glass under it, and in most communities, drink what comes out of it. So let's just take a moment to feel what a blessing globally that is. And then take a moment also to sit with the truth that God, the source of all life, will not allow us to ignore if we're open and if we want to live our faith journey with integrity, and that is this. The number one cause of death in the world is lack of access to clean water. As I sat with this truth this last week, it struck me, to be blunt, that my life, our lives as followers of Jesus, who came, as he said in John 10, that we might have life and have it more abundantly, it makes no sense if our Christianity is not somehow connected to the number one cause of death in the world. I'm grateful for our denominational offerings. Some of that, one great hour of sharing money, for example, goes to build wells in so-called third world places. We are connected that way. But Jesus said in Matthew 25, I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. Most of you have heard that, and people say, when? And Jesus says, whatever you did or didn't do to the least, to the people socioeconomically on the bottom, you did or did not do to me. Here's my point. I think we need to do something more directly with water. Oh, we don't need another major initiative. We got enough going on. But let's ask God if there's something specific regarding water that we can do. It'll be symbolic, but real. Just this past week, I got a request from my friends in Haiti, and if you're new to, I've been working with grassroots organizations in Haiti for over 30 years. And my friends in Haiti who run a school, that the water tanks on the roof of the school that provide clean drinking water from the kids, this is where Chakey used to work, that got shot up by gangs. So the water tanks are full of bullet holes. We need to replace those tanks. What are we going to do? I'm not suggesting that that's ours to do, but I am suggesting it's not hard to find something tangible that we can do. And of course, we haven't even touched the issues of eco-justice connected to water, or lead in water, or plastic, or other chemicals in water. But these are spiritual issues for us. These are biblical issues for us. And our faith makes no sense if we're not passionately connected to these things. Our faith is not an escape to heaven after we die. It's transforming this world here, now. We'll let the hereafter take care of itself. So, water polluted by corporate greed and toxic waste, and the issues of how communities of color are more disproportionately impacted by these things. Yep, all of that stuff that we have to take a look at. And I can't talk about this, and I'm almost done, don't worry. I know. First Sunday of the month, it goes a little bit long. By the way, I have to tell you, Jeffrey, who really didn't go to church much when he was in Haiti, he said he wants to keep coming here and he loves our church. And I said, oh yeah, why is that? And he said, because it doesn't take very long. In Haiti, they sing for an hour before they even start the worship. He's in Haiti, you go to church, you're there 3, 4, 5 hours. He said, you guys are done in, hour and 15 maybe. I told him I would use that. But for those of you who weren't here a month ago when they shared their story of coming here from Brazil, we recorded it. I haven't finished editing it yet. I promise you I will. But part of that story involved walking through the jungle, the Amazon jungle, on foot for 6 days with little baby Jefferson. And they ran out of water. And what they had to deal with, I'm not going to get into it. But I just had to honor their experience. So I want to end on a positive note. On a beautiful note, really. One more very quick point and then a little story. Then we'll have communion, we'll sing, we're done. Jeffrey, where are you? Jesus said in the Gospel of John, those who believe in me will never thirst. Obviously, he was talking spiritually. He also said in Matthew 5, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they'll be satisfied. Don't let the word righteousness trip you up. He was just saying that if you hunger and thirst to live your life in alignment with the divine flow of love and grace and goodness and mercy, compassion, justice, if you live in alignment with that, you will experience a satisfaction that you won't be able to explain to anybody. The peace that passes understanding. That's what I wish for every one of us. And when I go around talking about Jesus in my life, it's not because I'm trying to save people from hell or convince them of something or make them think about me. It's because I long for them to be as deeply satisfied and content and experience the joy that I have simply by trying to know God. Nothing more beautiful. All right. So it's kind of like on a hot day, when you're really thirsty and you get a nice, cool drink, that feeling, that's what our souls feel. The story. Some of you have heard it before, but it's probably my favorite story. So if you heard it before, it's not going to hurt you to hear it again. Quit looking at your watch. And those of you who haven't heard it, I want you to hear it. This guy named Tony Campolo. He's an author, preacher, evangelist, a approaching 90 now, winding it down. A friend of mine as well. And he started an organization in Haiti. It was his stories like this one and others before it that really put Haiti on the map for me over 30 years ago. His son, Bart, who's about my age, was a teenager, early teens. He was really into BMX bikes. And he came home from school one day and he said, "Dad, Mom, at dinner, I need a new bike." And his dad said, "You need a new bike?" And he said, I know. I don't need a new bike. I want a new bike." And his dad said, "Well, okay, we can get you a new bike, or we could take the same money and send it to the village in Haiti that our church works with so that they could have clean water." And Tony said, whenever I tell people this story, they're like, "Tony, what a horrible thing, a guilt trip to lay on your kid, you manipulative thing." And he said, "No, you know what's worse is to raise our children thinking that our financial choices don't have consequences." So Bart said, "Okay, let's send the money instead." And they worked it out. Bart got some jobs and contributed, and the parents contributed. He got the bike. But the point was made. And a few years later, Bart went with his dad to Haiti to visit the village that their church had been supporting. And they got there, and the whole village, all the kids, the adults, ran to greet them. They knew who they were and where they were from. They ran to greet them. They treated them like a rock star. They swarmed around them, and all day long they were playing with them and thanking and going to the well and giving them cold cups of water to drink and said, "Thank you so much. We love this water." At the end of the day, Bart and Tony are driving back to their hotel. And Bart is very quiet, just looking out the window, and his dad sees him and says, "Bart, you're quiet. What's up?" And Bart just said, "Dad, there's no bike or anything I could buy that could give me what I feel inside right now." And his dad said, "Yeah, it feels good, doesn't it?" And Bart said, "Yeah." And his dad said, "We don't do things like this to make ourselves feel good. But it does feel good when you live life in alignment with God." All right, more than enough. So, communion table, especially on World Communion Sunday, represents the fact that we're all connected. Not just people, everything. We're all connected. It's easy to forget, but Jesus gave us this to remind us there's one table, one loaf of bread, one cup that we all share. Part of the dance of life and of following Jesus is figuring out how to make sure that what this one loaf of resources in the world gets all around. Everybody has access. Everybody's welcome to the table. So, you are welcome. Even if you're brand new here, we don't have any rules around communion. We practice open communion. So whatever you believe or don't believe, this is God's bread. We believe God's table. You are welcome. We want you to have it, whatever it means to you.